Welcome back to the Badger Den StrengthCast. I'm Sean.
I'm Sailor.
I think we're going to keep the name.
Yeah.
I think it's just stuck at this point.
It's just there. It's just a permanent, it's association. And I think over time it'll evolve, and who knows, maybe we won't talk about strength all the time, and maybe we will.
Who knows?
Who knows?
Who knows?
Who knows?
Speaking of things to talk about, I forgot all of my notes on my phone at home. But that's
Yeah.
all right. We're going to do it. We're going to do it live.
That's all right.
Today is, what is today, the 3rd?
Sunday the 4th.
Okay, so we're recording this on the 4th, and it's going to come out on the 11th then, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we're doing these, a week behind. So we're going to have to start thinking about, like, when we're doing announcements and stuff, doing them ahead of time. But to that point, there's a few things that aren't going to make a lot of sense to talk about right now. But going forward, when you're listening to this, it's going to be... What's the phone for?
I don't know, just if we want to look through what we're doing this next week,
okay.
Because I got it up. You don't have
Well,
yours.
only the first day is accurate because I haven't put in all of the workouts yet. I was only able to get the one in since this is my 4th day in a row with my kids home. But when you're listening to this, there's going to be 2 weeks left of the first portion of the block we're currently on for people on percentages, because we're going to have a deload week at the end of February for anybody who hasn't heard from me already. So the stuff that we've moved into in this last week, this will be just like 3 weeks of these current exercises before we have a deload, and then move into the next phase of the cycle in that first week of March.
Nice. I see, I haven't looked at this yet, so I'm excited to jump in tomorrow morning.
Yeah, the big thing, is the landmine stuff on Monday is like leveling up, right? So we're not doing the pound squats anymore. We're not doing the quilling deadlifts. There's a little bit of technique work on that first one where it's that screwdriver switch, and that's really meant more for like speed, precision, explosiveness, like really looking to nail that elbow into the hip, right?
Yeah.
Looking for that short side. So you're like hitting that big switch and switching from, left side long, right side short to left side short, right side long, right?
Yeah, I think I'm gonna for me in this, my focus this week with these things is kind of jumping off of what we talked about last week. For me personally, I'm going to get that starting position and kind of get stuff dialed in how I feel, the short side, long side, and get coiled lats down and back. But then I'm going to try to just be like explosive with it and move naturally. Just kinda move how I want to move and not necessarily think too much about it. Just kind of like go for speed. Because I think for me sometimes when I try to just go for speed instead of control, stuff kind of works out a little bit better.
I think you have a good point with that because especially as the more advanced we get, like we kind of have to remove this idea of like internal cueing and like thinking about muscles and bones and placements and things like that, and more about how you're moving an external object, right?
Mm-hmm.
The more advanced you get, the more it serves you to be like just letting your body do what it does and just think about moving the fucking thing, right? And that's something I think that gets lost, especially as you kind of transition from that novice to that intermediate phase. So whether that's like a barbell squat or this landmine stuff, like it's just the same. Like you should be thinking about your intention on how to move the thing more so than like little things, unless I'm like telling you, a specific cue to change something, right? But for the most part, like all intents and purposes, the intention should be on doing the objective more so than like how you should be moving your body.
Yeah. To that front, I found it pretty useful even in other movements to think about how the bar is moving instead of how my body's moving, and just think about moving the bar as opposed to like moving me. Some psychological cues there. But I'm excited looking at these movements. I think I'm with the way, since I wake up at 5, I want to do warm-ups in the morning, like right when I wake up. So basically, use the bathroom, drink some water, come out in the living room and do like the warm-ups here because I wake up at 5 instead of like lingering for like, because I live like 5 minutes from the gym, instead of like lingering for 20 minutes and then come in and I can just kind of be like ready to rock.
Yeah, I think that's actually a great idea. I do that myself a lot of times.
Mm-hmm. Especially since I'm kind of working with limited time too. So it's like at like 6:30 is realistically like the point where I'm like, I got to get the fuck out of here because I still got to get home, shower, grab breakfast, and then drive 30 minutes to get to work.
The one thing I'd say is, like, if you're going to do it that way, save the dynamic stretch series for, like, the first thing you do here, or do at the gym, rather.
Yeah.
So that, like, you can kind of shake off sitting in the car, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's a good idea. But I've got the kettlebells here, too, so a lot of little stuff.
Oh, sure,
I
yeah.
can just use the kettlebells. 35 pounds, but I think that's
plenty for warm-ups, right?
Yeah.
Like, I think the things that are going to change tomorrow is, like, the single leg deadlift. So it's going to be, instead of B stance, now we're going true single leg, right?
I really like the B stance, though.
Oh,
what if I want to keep doing the B
great.
stance?
But, like, sometimes it's time to move to the next grade.
I guess.
Summer's over, baby.
Such a good
time to go to second grade now.
Such a good stretch through that hamstring and that planted foot.
Well, and to that point, like, these are graduating for a reason. So I want you to be able to, like, lean on all that experience in the first 4 weeks and really try and hit those same feelings, have those same positions in the next exercise, right?
Yeah.
Rather than just throwing this at you week 1, right? It's meant to ramp you there.
Yeah, I think part of it is just going to have to be, like, relearning the movement, because single leg stuff that we've done a long time in the past, and for some reason it's obviously now that I'm doing it not quite correctly that I'm not getting, that I can move arguably a step back towards that B stance and get a better stretch in the hamstring than I do doing, like, the single leg.
Well, there's 2 thoughts to that point, because, like, first, it would make more sense to me on a level that you can get a better stretch on the B stance because you don't have to stabilize yourself. So with the B stance, that's one of the big benefits is you don't need to stabilize, so you can push into stretches more, whereas if you try to do that, with just one leg on the floor, your body's going to have a harder time hitting that length without feeling stable already, right?
That makes sense.
But I really like your point of having to relearn the movement, because that's kind of like what I'm trying to get you to do by starting you with some, like, downgraded exercises, right?
Yeah, I think that plays back to the thing that I've mentioned to a few people back when I was coaching, is the idea of, like, if it feels easy, then you're probably doing it wrong.
Sure, yeah, makes sense.
And I just especially with, like, warm-ups, and that's not to say that you should be, like, increasing weight for
trying
difficulty.
to fucking win the warm-ups. Some people are really much that way.
It's more so about, have we recorded one where we talked about this? I'm getting weird deja vu.
Winning the warm-up? I think that was one of our demos.
Okay. There's, like, this even especially with the body weight or the body movement stuff, there's, like, really small adjustments that you can make that can make, like, a huge difference. Just like if I square my hips a little bit more when I'm doing certain movements, it's like way deeper. And I think if you just kind of come in and with the thought process of, like, I just want to get through these reps, as opposed to coming in with the thought process of, like, I'm here to warm up, well, then you're just going to get through the reps, but you're not going to get warmed up.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's your time to explore. And, like, if you can, like, really take the time to do it, it's like you're adding a penny to the bank every time you do it, right? Because, like, how you move is just going to be accumulation of all your experience of moving that way before, right? So if you're not having a lot of intention behind how you're moving, you're never really going to get better, and a lot of times you're just going to get sloppier when you do it.
This is a good thing. Well, I'm going to kind of, like, go through this and kind of look at these movements, and if there's any, like, movements that, since, we're coming into, like, changing exercises up a little bit. Obviously, it'll be technically a week late, but
yeah, but it'll still be good to hear.
Still be useful. So what's this? The tiger crawl.
So the tiger crawl, and just, like, again, only Mondays are going to be on there switched.
Yeah, we'll start with Mondays,
but the tiger crawl is kind of the evolution of the cat crawl, where, like, the cat crawl, we're really trying to be steady and stable, right? The idea of, you've heard me say it 100 fucking times in the gym. Imagine you got a hot cup of coffee at the top of your ass crack. Don't spill a drop, right? You want to try and hold that tabletop as flat, as stable as you can as you move along. But now, with all this concept of the coiling, I want you to try and bring the coil into the cat crawl, and we call it the tiger crawl.
So we're prowl.
Right? Well, that's exactly it. I even write that. I even write prowl. I'm pretty sure.
You do prowl. That's great. Yeah. We're in the jungle. We're hunting.
Yeah. So this idea of, like, articulating your spine a little bit more, letting yourself move a little bit more free, dissociating your shoulder from your pelvis, right?
Yeah.
And creating more of this torque, this idea of using the spine as an engine, using this coil, and it comes right after the coiling wall stretch for a reason, right? Which, if you don't notice, there's also an extra breath on there now. Before it was 3 breaths, 3 seconds in, seconds out. Yes. Just to continue to try and dial that experience in as well. Again, especially if you can have the intention behind it, that makes all the difference.
For sure. Yeah, I like that. Just pretend that you're, like, motion capturing a tiger.
Sure. Yeah, okay. Yeah, I really like that, like, if you can really conceptualize what it's like to prowl, where it's like those really soft steps, right? You're not trying to move hard. It's really everything is smooth.
Yeah.
Right?
Smoothness, I think, is the thought.
Which is,
like,
everyone's going to fucking struggle in the beginning, right? It's going to be challenging.
And everybody's probably going to feel a little bit silly, but have
every
fun with it.
Every fucking person does it, right? We all do stupid shit at the gym.
All right, so then the 12-inch box drop plus natural rebound. So now this is kind of, I think we've done this before.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this isn't the one where we're trying to keep contact to the ground super limited, right? Or is this that one where we're stepping off the box and then bounding up onto the next box like as quickly as possible?
I would say it's kind of an intermediate between the two of those concepts, where you want to step off and hit the floor, but we're not trying to stick the landing. You're supposed to kind of let yourself absorb and rebound, right? That's that natural rebound idea.
Yeah.
And the video on that's really good. It does a really good job of demonstrating what it looks like.
Okay.
But if you can think of like a dense rubber ball that doesn't have a lot of bounce to it, falling off the countertop, and it just kind of is that da-da-da-da-da. You know, that like it comes to that dead stop after a couple quick bounces.
Then we got the paused and then tempo right after.
Oh, so that tempo is a mistake.
Oh, so it's supposed to be paused.
Yeah, so it's a good thing you're looking through this.
All right.
So we're moving into isometrics now.
Okay.
It's 3 seconds, 2 to 3 second holds at the bottom, right? So it's just the evolution of what we were doing with the eccentrics. So now we can kind of carry all that work we had with the eccentrics and bring it into this next phase of muscle contraction, which is isometric, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if I don't remember much I went into detail on this, or if this was a podcast released, but there's 3 phases of contraction, right? There's the eccentric, the isometric, the concentric. The eccentric is what we were doing with the slow tempo down, right? Building that ability to lengthen under tension, lengthen under load. And now we're working on the next phase of contraction, which is isometric. So regardless of what kind of contraction you're looking at, whenever you lengthen and shorten, there's going to be what's called an amortization phase where you're doing nothing in the middle, regardless of how short it is, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we're just building that ability to be in that phase, how strong that phase is, so that if you bottom out in a squat, you're strong in the bottom of the squat, right?
Yeah.
That's the whole thing, right?
Yeah.
But like when it comes to athletic movement, being able to be strong there, but also quickly get out of it is going to be a big part of what like makes somebody powerful, makes somebody fast, explosive.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, now I've sent you some stuff too about the paused squat work where it was kind of more towards the weightlifting side of things. So it was kind of about being relaxed in the bottom and sinking like as deep into it as possible, almost like you could hang out there and then coming out of that position.
It might be in the next block.
Okay.
Because the next block's going to be Oli stuff.
Okay. Very cool.
So yeah, it's not going to be this isometric isn't meant to be like a relaxed pause, because then it technically wouldn't really be an isometric contraction. It would just be like hanging out in the bottom.
Yeah.
This is meant to have tension in the bottom still.
Okay. I can get behind it. And then this is one that I've been messing up with the single arm kettlebell bench press. It's only 2 to 3 reps. For some reason, every time I go into it, I'm like, all right, 8 reps. Let's go.
Yeah, and I mean, so a good thought about that one going into it is it's really more to open up the chest as we go down into the rest of the exercises, right?
Yeah.
And like kind of release the pec a little bit to let the shoulder move a little bit more freely.
Yeah, I was thinking about kicking up the weight just a little bit.
And that's
just
fine.
Help pull,
yeah.
kind of.
Yeah, as long as you're thinking of it like primarily for length, right?
Yeah, like
and like articulation
down
through the shoulder, right? Because it's not meant to be like a hard press.
Yeah.
Right? It's just there to open you up.
Hell yeah. All right, now we're into the landmine stuff. It's a little bit weird. So this landmine screwdriver split switch.
The landmine screwdriver split switch.
Yeah.
I may have mixed up the words order, but you'll get the gist of what I'm talking about here.
Mm-hmm.
You've got the landmine right at the chest, as if you're about to start the lunge or about to start the step press or something like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
But instead of pressing it or stepping anywhere, you're just keeping the end of the barbell directly at your chest and rotating yourself around the bar so that you're switching which side is coiled. And you got to be quick with the feet. So you're gonna kind of give yourself a little hop and then switch which leg is in the lead and switch which side you're bringing the elbow in to bring to that coil, right?
Yeah.
So, if your left leg lead, elbow pinned to that left hip, in one quick explosive motion, you want to switch the feet, hit the floor, and have your right elbow in your right hip.
And always in the balls of the feet, right?
Always
so
in the balls of the feet. Always forward intent.
pressure.
Yeah, exactly. That angle of attack, right?
Yeah, I like that one. That one sounds good.
And it's really more of like a practice thing. It's not meant to be something that has weight on it. I mean, you realistically could put some weight on it, but it wouldn't matter a whole lot. It's just to prime that ability to snap that elbow to the hip because we're moving into cleans after that, right?
Yeah, it's almost like weight almost feels like the only reason you would put weight on is to get to like stabilization almost, because you're not really moving the weight.
Yeah.
Like as you move your coil around
Exactly.
that landmine, it's not going anywhere.
It's more about your own body positioning, right?
Yeah.
And to that point, you don't want the head of that barbell to be jumping around, right? You
No.
want it always directly in that same spot it started.
Yeah.
But then going into the clean, it's just kind of a combination. I think I write this at the top of the description too. It's like a combination of the split deadlift from the first portion of this block and what we just do before this with the screwdriver drill, right?
Yeah.
So that you're beginning with the deadlift.
So we're starting down.
Yes, you're starting from that
snapping up.
That position. Yeah, you get that long pull, and then you snap yourself underneath into that position like the screwdriver to get yourself to that coil, and then you've done the clean, right?
See, yeah, that sounds good. That almost feels like it's going to be the missing link for a lot of people who are like struggling with the deadlift by itself.
Yeah.
And then they're going to come in and do this and be like, oh, okay.
Makes sense now.
Yeah, it makes sense now. All right.
So hopefully building all this strength in that position really carries over into the ability to do these cleans. Right?
Yeah.
And then there's only one more on this one. You know that there's higher sets, lower reps, and fewer exercises. Now we're starting to drive more toward power production on this stuff.
Yeah.
But that last one now is the step back press. So, previously the first 4 weeks, it's the step press where you're pushing forward into the weight.
Yeah.
And this one's simultaneously stepping back on the same side as you have the landmine and pressing the landmine forward. So you're you're taking your short side and making it your long side by stepping back into it, right? So
away from that landmine.
Away from it, yes, essentially. Which we keep moving away from
away from the mic as I'm doing it. It's a little dynamic.
Yes, so what makes it tricky for some people is that you're switching which foot is moving in space in this exercise, right? So in the step press, you're pushing off of your lead foot and moving your trail leg, right? So your rear leg becomes your foreleg, your lead leg in the step press. In this one, it's just the opposite. We're starting from the coil and taking our lead leg and putting it behind us, right? So the lead leg is coming off of the floor and reaching back instead of the rear leg coming forward. So it screws people up sometimes. But anyways, I mean, you'll get it more when you try it.
Yeah, it's a little bit different because you're used to that short side, that coiled side being the force generator.
The driver,
yeah, the generator through the floor, whereas this time it's almost, you're kind of thinking about it as being your back leg isn't necessarily the driving, but it's like the stabilizing.
Yep.
And you're kind of moving your body around that plant.
And you got to learn how to drive off of that hip as you move, right?
Now, I'm already imagining with this one, you're going to need like space to do this. So you're probably going to have to start like quite a bit more tucked under that landmine than you normally would, no?
Compared to the step press, for sure.
Yeah.
Yes. It's going to be kind of, because again, it's kind of the opposite, right? Instead of stepping forward, you're stepping back. So you got to start a little bit more forward so that you have the room to step back.
Yeah.
You're exactly right.
All right. And I think that then this is the Metcon, and I won't. Well, everybody will have already done it. So
right.
Nothing to like spoil, but every EMOMs with goblet squats, push-ups, and chin-ups.
But I think
not losing the push-ups.
Well, hey, there's only 3. But to that point, I think it's a good thing to bring up here. I've been writing this in the notes a lot, but I think sometimes this is missed because most people are just like, I'll just fucking get to the finisher and do it. I don't need to read it, whatever.
Yeah.
But a lot of times with these EMOMs, the point has really been to be getting in quality work, not just work for the sake of work, right?
Yeah.
So it's meant to be easy enough that every rep, every one of the minutes looks perfect, right? We want to be getting the best practice we can on every movement, right?
Yeah.
So if you can do 5 chin-ups hanging from the bar, but doing, 2 chin-ups for 8 minutes gets tough, always feel free to dial it back, right? Maybe you can start with 2 chin-ups the first couple minutes, but as soon as you start to let that fatigue creep in, as soon as you start to get sloppy on these things, it's going back to this same concept we keep talking about. Like, every rep is practice, whether you want it to be or not. And if you're doing the reps wrong, you're ingraining an improper pattern, and you're more likely to want to move to that pattern as you get fatigued, because that's when you start to see that pattern. It's under fatigue, right?
Yeah.
Whereas if you're constantly only practicing the best reps, even when you're fatigued, you're going to really fight to keep that perfect posture, right? And, when we're talking about like return on investment in any of these movements, right? If you can think about like what you're getting out of the exercise, a lot of times if you can like maybe make the movement a little bit easier, but make every rep fucking perfect, you're going to be so much better off in the long run than if you had just like tried to make it hard.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, no, to that front, you kind of already answered a bit just for confirmation. Do you think it's worthwhile to start with, I don't want to say the hardest, but like one of the more difficult variations that you can do, and then like willingly step back in that variation as it becomes to the point where you can't like do it, or not, maybe even not that far, but like as soon as it's like a struggle, because I think you can know like this is an EMOM, so if I'm just doing like, because I suck at chin-ups, so let's say, but I can probably do 2 for like a couple minutes, like strict, normal. And then at that point, I'm like, okay, I'm not getting another one of these. So then do like deficit or kipping or like feet on the floor or something.
Yes, absolutely. I think that's a great idea. And a lot of times once you're a little bit more advanced, it's the place I'll push people to go. But a lot of people have already kind of heard me talk about this concept, usually with ring rows, because ring rows are a really easy one to do this during. So say you've got like 21 fucking ring rows, right?
Mm-hmm.
And maybe you started a little bit too hard. You can always walk the feet back a little bit. Right?
Yeah.
And it's that same exact concept, right? It's just like adjusting it as much as necessary to make sure that the reps are the best quality they can be, right? And like, you've got that rest period in the EMOM like that. You can always kind of take that moment to assess and be like, am I working too hard? Because, if you're asking that question and you're on the percentage program, it's probably a yes.
True.
If you didn't have anything else you want to talk about, like about the program, I know one thing that Jen had mentioned in her email was, and that we had started touching on in the podcast that didn't work out, was performance and eating for performance, right?
Yeah, eating for performance.
Which is kind of a natural progression of what we were talking about with protein 2 podcasts ago.
Yeah. Yeah, we can talk about that.
And I mean, some of this is going to be a little bit more advanced, so it won't be as applicable to people who are just starting out, but there'll still be some concepts here that can be taken into like daily life or down the line have good information for, right? But I mean, when it comes to like eating for performance, not to continue to harp on protein too much, but that's always going to be like one of the first things to look at is, yes, are you eating enough protein? Because if you're not going to come into the gym recovered enough to do your best performance, right?
Mm-hmm. Here's a funny little thing about protein that I was watching another YouTube video from a strongman who was doing, kind of showcasing his diet, eats a ton of meat. But one thing that they said that it was kind of fun that I might try myself is that drinking a glass of orange juice with your high protein like meats, and it helps the digestion process basically because you have the acidity and the enzymes from the orange juice, and it can help indigestion if you're a person that gets indigestion with eating like red meat or even fish.
Huh. That's interesting. I would be curious to see how it plays out.
Yeah, I don't know if like scientifically it's like true.
Yeah,
but
it feels like I gotta think of the pH of orange juice, and I feel like it can't be as high as stomach acid or low.
I think a big part of it is more the enzyme activity, because I mean a lot of the fruits that we eat, like kiwis, eat you too. So like
sure, I get that.
And like I guess maybe like obviously lemonade probably, unless you're doing like fresh squeezed lemonade, but that's like one of those where it's more like sugar than it's like truly like lemonade. But because like ceviche is like really literally just
it's just lemon juice.
Just lemon juice. So, but I don't know. He also puts a scoop of Greek yogurt in with his orange juice, and he says it tastes like an orange sherbet.
Oh, that sounds great.
Actually, right?
Yeah.
I was like, I want to try that next time. It's just like a big spoonful of Greek yogurt and orange juice.
I've made smoothies like that, but I've never thought to do it on like a smaller scale.
Yeah.
But, beyond protein, which we've already harped on enough, we got to think about carbs, we got to think about fats, and we want to think about, like, what's considered micronutrients, right?
Yeah.
So, carbs, fats, these are things that are energy, right? Whereas micronutrients, we're talking about, like, magnesium, calcium, zinc, vitamin C, vitamin B, all these little things that you see on the label. That's what we're talking about when it comes to micronutrients. It's just essentially the vitamins and minerals that make your body be able to work.
Yeah, quite literally. Like most of the pumps, well, I don't know.
We don't need to get too much into physiology.
Yeah, most of the things that your body does requires sodium and calcium and potassium.
Mm-hmm. When it comes to eating for performance, like, first you want to make sure you have enough energy, right? So, like, it's really hard to eat for performance and also be in a calorie deficit because your performance is never going to be as good as it could have been.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, it depends on what your goals are at any given time, right? Sometimes performance isn't the number one goal. But if you're, like, not trying to intentionally lose weight and, you know, your calories are at least at, like, a balance, you know, where you're not losing any energy, you're, you know, potentially gaining some energy, gaining some mass, right? These are good places to be thinking about performance from. Because whether you're in, like, you know, a maintenance phase where you're trying to just keep the same weight, relatively speaking, or gaining weight, you can think of both of those things from the side of performance. It's like, when it comes to bulking, sometimes people get too much on just bulking and not enough about how bulking can also help performance.
Yeah. Hydration, too.
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
A adjacent thing that is heavily performance linked. It's important to keep in mind when you're looking at, like, what sort of block you're in, kind of keeping that, being cognizant of that when you're planning your bulk cut maintenance phases, because there are definitely phases that are more conducive to a cutting phase than others. You know, any time that we're building up to a 1 rep max, I think would be a really silly time to try to cut.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, and you can certainly do it. I've definitely done a diet and still hit PRs on my strength stuff, but you got to be wise. You got to plan it well, right? But, like, when we're looking at our blocks, the way our blocks are structured, basically, you know, the first 8 to realistically, like, 12 weeks of any given block, you could run a good diet or a good cut, which is also, like, funny enough, like, a pretty sweet spot for how long you should run something like that.
Yeah.
So, like, if we're moving into another block, like, say, you know, May comes around, we've done our 1 rep maxes, you want to try and get that summer shred, it's a good time to do it because we're going to start the next block with a lot more volume, which is going to help you keep muscle mass as you keep a calorie deficit. You got to be careful about, like, what weights you're selecting because you're not going to be able to recover as well, right, with regards to performance.
But rep ranges too, right? I think a lot of people see the rep ranges and they're like, they don't utilize them as the tool that they are, right? Like the extra customization to hit that perceived effort, and instead are just kind of like, 5 to 8 reps, time to do 8 reps.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That happens a lot. Or like a 20 to 30, right?
Yeah.
And, like, really, I mean, we're getting a little bit off on a tangent here, but if you're looking at something like a 20 to 30 rep, or like maybe a better example is a 10 to 20. If we're looking at something that says 10 to 20 reps, and you want to, like, tailor the program to yourself a little bit, if you're looking for some more volume, whether that's because you're in a diet phase and you want to maintain muscle mass better, or you're in a bulk phase and you want to push growth a little bit better, if you can think about trying to hit the higher end of that range at RPE, which is going to require lower weights, you're probably going to be better off for your muscle goals, right? Versus if you're more concerned about strength and you're not so much worried about muscle mass, usually like in a maintenance phase, right, where you're not trying to deliberately change your body weight. If you start to put your emphasis more toward the fewer rep side, so if it's 10 to 20, more like 10, that's going to drive your strength gains better than if you were doing something for 20 reps. Now, it's marginal, right?
Yeah.
The amount of difference we're looking at here. But if we're looking at it from a terms of optimization, there is a difference.
And also, because we're talking about, this is generalization when we're talking about cycles or phases, but this is also something about, like, clean eating and even sleep is, if I go a weekend or a number of days and I'm eating like shit and I'm sleeping like shit, when I come in, I'm not going to try to kill myself to get 30 reps in a 20 to 30 rep range. I'm going to get my 20 and be okay with it.
Or just go extra fucking light and maybe you end up at 27.
Light. Yeah. It's always important to adjust to get the best outcomes.
And I bitch about it a lot, right? The intermediate program is an effort-based program, not a numbers-based program, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're a lot of times stuck on that idea of numbers. It's about numbers coming off of having to always track your numbers when you're in that base program.
Yeah.
But there is that shift, right? You have to make that mental shift that, like, we've got the numbers, right? Now we just have to work at a correct effort level to make sure our fatigue level is managed by the time we get to our 1 rep max phase, right?
Yeah.
Because now we're bigger, we're stronger, we're smarter, right? You gotta be smarter on how you train.
Hell yeah.
Okay. But reining it back in a little bit, bringing it back to eating for performance, when we're thinking about carbs and fats, they're energy, but they're not the same energy, right? Fats are better for some things, carbs are better for some things. Generally, when we're looking at gym performance or endurance performance, except for like ultra endurance stuff, carbs are going to be the go-to. Carbs are going to be the better source of energy. And, I mean, there's a few reasons behind that, but without going too much into detail, fats, they're generally, they are higher calorie, right? It's 9 calories per gram of a fat versus it's 4 calories per gram of a carbohydrate. So in any phase, carbohydrates are going to be relatively more filling because you have to eat more than twice as much of the fats in terms of grams to get the same amount of energy. So maybe that sounded weird.
You did it backwards, I think.
So you have
twice
to eat
as much carbs
yes,
as fats.
That's what I meant. Yes.
Yeah, yep.
So like because it's 4 versus 9, right?
Yeah,
you have to eat at least 2 grams of carbs to match 1 gram of fats. Is what I'm saying.
Yep.
So like it's going to take up more room in your stomach, right? So if you're in a diet phase, something good to consider. If you're trying to gain a lot of weight, you might want more fats because it's going to take up less space. But either way, you want to have a good amount of carbs in the diet to help drive your performance in the gym, right? So, like, if you're really looking at optimization, if you can figure out how few of fats you can get away with and direct things more towards carbs, that's going to let you a lot of times push just a little bit harder in the gym. And, like, these things are very... The amount of gain you'll get from it's very small, right? Again, it's marginal, right? But again, if we're coming from an optimization standpoint, that's what's going to be reality, right? So, like, for most people, you don't have to think too hard about it because it's going to be fine either way. But fats tend to be better for long endurance events because they take longer to break down. They're bigger. They require a different point in essentially, like, your body's ability to generate energy. And it's much better suited toward something like, a 50K, right?
Yeah.
Running a 50K instead of doing a 1 rep max, right? Because you're not going to be able to use any fats for a 1 rep max, realistically. I mean, you're not going to use that many carbs either, realistically.
Yeah.
But regardless, the more explosive something is, the more fast something is, the shorter duration something is, the better off carbs are going to be fueling that thing, right?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of sort of actionable things with what you can be eating to kind of get better, performance in it, and it's really just kind of like I think it's almost easier to be like, what shouldn't you be eating?
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point you make because it's really, I think, more about being intentional about the kinds of foods you're eating. Instead of getting your carbs from potato chips or something, right?
Yeah.
Which are going to come with a bunch of fats and add a bunch of other things that maybe you don't want. It'll be a lot easier to get those carbohydrates from something like a sweet potato.
Yeah, and kind of similar. I hope nobody's doing this, but you also can't like just eat all your carbs in the form of like lettuce, because not only would you have some crazy shits, but it's all fiber for the most part. You're not really getting a whole lot of nutritional carbohydrates from something like raw lettuce.
I just see you keep checking your phone.
Oh no, I'm just doing it for.
Okay, I wasn't sure if we were like short on
No,
time.
there's no time constraint. I'm just being fidgety right now.
Let's get you a little fidget.
Yeah, I should get a fidget spinner or something. I do tend to like fidget with things like at work and at my desk and things. I got a bunch of shit laying around.
But yeah, so I mean, in terms of actionable things for performance, it's just being more intentional about the things you're eating, making sure you're getting the protein, right? That's number one, and then just like assessing yourself and being like, what is my energy level like? Maybe you're feeling run down a lot. Might be a really good indicator that you just need a little bit more food, and that's not something a lot of people are willing to admit because we live in such a society that's like, well, I wouldn't want to get fat, can't eat that food, but like this is so intense on your body, you need the fuel.
There's also just some weird things that go on when you eat like plenty of food, but it's in forms that are good for you. Like, I don't know if you ever played around with reverse diets.
Yeah.
I did one for a bit, and I thought it was like the funniest thing ever, because for the first like 3 to 4 weeks of my reverse diet, where I was eating more food than I thought was possible, I was losing weight.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And it's like, what is going on? Literally, like, fruit juices just to get my carb numbers and stuff. But being cognizant about quality of food, you know, I wasn't eating Jack's Pizzas and cheeseburgers. Well, McDonald's cheeseburgers. I was eating cheeseburgers. But I was making them myself. But like it was funny. It was because I was losing weight because I was getting. I don't really even know why. It was like.
That's an interesting point, because we can kind of go back to talking about performance and how carbs come into play, because like all of a sudden you're adding in this energy, you're adding in these carbs, and your body's got a little bit more go in the gym, right? So you can actually push a little bit harder in the gym than you're used to, which like keeps your calorie burn at X amount of level, even though your energy intake is going up, right? So it's a really sneaky way to like essentially bring you back to baseline, right?
Yeah.
Which is what a reverse diet's meant to do, right? Which is essentially like when you're doing a reverse diet, it's like the idea that if you went from like 1,600 calories every day, and then you did your diet was done, you lost your weight, and then you jump right up to 2,400 calories, you might like have a more significant weight shift that like wasn't necessary. You might add a little bit more fat than you weren't expecting because there was such a drastic increase in your calories, even though like you're technically coming to a maintenance point.
Yeah.
And then like reverse diet is just essentially doing steps to get there. So instead of 1,600 straight into 2,400 the next week, it'd be like 1,600 to 1,750 to 1,900 or whatever, however that works out.
And it can even balloon up in the opposite direction too. So it's like on the principle of like, okay, let's say I'm a hypothetical person that maintenance is at 2,600, and then I'm cutting down over the course of 8 to 10 weeks or whatever on like a cutting phase, and then I end up at like dummy low like calories. And then I keep doing this between like maintenance and stuff, and then all of a sudden, in order to lose weight, my calculations are telling me that I'm like, oh, you gotta eat like 1,400 calories a day or something. And it's like, this is insane. And in some ways, you can use a reverse diet to sort of try to ramp up your calories, that maintenance, while like not necessarily gaining weight, if that makes sense. So like the idea would be that like, let's say at the end of this, I'm 2,600 calorie maintenance phase. I can slowly, at the end of my cutting period, I feel like I'm just re-saying exactly what you just said.
So just taking it back to actionable advice about performance in the gym, like just be, so I guess one thing I did want to mention is if you are curious about like trying to figure out how many calories you can eat without gaining weight, is to start weighing yourself. And a lot of people have dysfunctional relationships with weighing themselves, and if that's you, like that's really something that you should consider before trying something like this, and like really seriously consider whether you need to have some therapy directed around your relationship with food, because that's a serious thing, and a lot of times people don't take it seriously because it's, therapy is still taboo for the most part in the U.S., and especially when it comes to food and like self-control, there's a lot of shame and guilt that there shouldn't be, and like it's very normal for people to have these dysfunctional relationships with food just because of the nature of like things like social media and like just the American culture of shame and guilt in general, probably largely driven by like, Catholicism and other sorts of strict religions and things like that. But not to get off on too much of a tangent, if you've got a good relationship with food, if you're not worried about it and you can get on the scale and it's not going to be a big deal for you, something you can consider is weighing yourself 3 times a week. And just remembering it's a fucking number. It doesn't matter what the number says, right? If it says 160, if it says 260, that's not the point. It's really just a matter of, do I want the scale to be moving, and is it moving? So if you're weighing yourself 3 times a week, ideally consistently the same time of the morning, the same day of the week, non-consecutive days, so something like Monday, Wednesday, Friday in the morning, just after you've gone to the bathroom, you're naked, right? If you can do that and just ultimately take the average of those 3 weights each week and watch the trend line, if you're not going anywhere, then you're in maintenance, right? You don't have to think about some stupid calculation on the website that you find through Google that's probably not 100% accurate anyways, because all this stuff is just ballparks at the end of the day.
Yeah. I think the thing that gets in the way of people doing that is the is a lot of times it's the balance between, we talked a little bit about this, I don't know if that one released, but the balance between those, and this is Mike Urzatel talks about this, is the balance between like motivation, discipline, and there's a third one. Inspiration. And so a lot of times when people who don't typically diet start a diet, it's because of either, it's usually inspiration. It's like something key happened, and that's inspired them to be like, I'm making a change. And the problem is that in order to do this technique where you're weighing yourself 3 times a week and you're establishing maintenance, you need like 3 weeks to minimum to kind of be like, oh, am I not moving anywhere? Is the scale not moving anywhere? Okay. And tracking how much you're eating every day to kind of figure out where you're at. Whereas I think the calculation can be helpful if you're trying to just like come in and you're trying to get that ball rolling and keep it rolling, and doing the calculation, getting a ballpark, following the calculation, but then still weighing yourself 3 times a week, and then kind of seeing where that's moving from that point.
I think that's very fair, and I think it kind of depends on like where in your journey you're starting something like this. Because in my mind, I was imagining somebody who's maybe a little bit further along the journey, and they already have a very consistent habit of going to the gym 3 times a week. They probably eat something relatively similar week over week. If those are kind of the cases, then just like adding in the habit of weighing themselves a couple times a week, that's not too big of a jump.
No.
And it's you don't even really need to worry about how many calories you're burning if you're being consistent about like the meals you're eating each week. If what you're eating is varying wildly week over week, then like it's gonna be hard to be accurate, right?
Yeah,
but for all intents and purposes.
Yeah, I think that the weighing yourself consistently is fantastic for no matter where in your journey you are, because you got to know, and
well, you don't have to, but you could.
And again, like you said, it's not about the number; it's just about that trend. But also, you could not. I guess now that I'm thinking about it, like you're totally. I would be. I think that there probably exists out there a motivation and like a style for diet where you don't necessarily care about what the number says, and then I almost think in that way you should kind of run it based on like a scale of maybe like how you feel, what your performance at the gym was like subjectively, and kind of look at that trend line and just be like, hey, do I feel better? Is my performance better?
Yeah. When we're looking at like being in a maintenance mode, something like that, or eating for performance, not like caring too much about like if you still have fucking abs come winter or whatever. Like that's a great way to think about it. I thought you were gonna go the other way with it for like a diet and go by feel. I was like, well, that's definitely something you can do by feel after you've got some experience under your belt, but it's another one of those things that having some hard numbers helps.
I think I'm just kind of like leaning into that idea of which we talked about in one of ours that we never released, was the concept of like sometimes people feel like they need to lose weight and they don't really need to lose weight.
Yeah, that's a very good topic to hit on, and probably like if people are curious to hear more of our opinions on it, something we could do another episode about, because I'm sure we're getting short on time at this point.
Yeah, I think we're running into the 40-ish minutes, but go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't like you don't have to go to the gym to lose weight. In a gym like ours, like you can certainly do that, but like let yourself have some fun with it, right? Yeah, sure. Let yourself have some fun lifting the fucking weights before you try to drop some weight, right? Because you're gonna have a much harder time getting into a habit like what we're doing, trying to simultaneously lose weight in the beginning, right? A lot of times people are just gonna lose weight automatically, and not that needs to matter at all, right? But just because of what's happening to a person's body when they start a program like this, those things just kind of fall into place a lot of times. And, maybe you're someone who plays roller derby and you don't want to lose mass, right? Mm-hmm. The diet should be the very last thing you're thinking about and something like that. You should just be coming in, making sure you're eating your fucking food and lifting your fucking weights.
Yeah, for sure. That's a great example of a person that really should just be eating for feels. Eating for like maintaining their strength. Like, am I still hitting my numbers every week? Do I still feel like I'm having impact in practice? All these things, and then almost adjusting food up if you're not. Yeah. Especially if you're going from like not necessarily doing strength training and then coming in and doing strength training.
Because you don't got to look any type of way for any type of person. You don't owe anybody that shit, right? It's your body.
Hell yeah.
Fuck everybody else. If you want to be lean, that's cool. If you don't, who gives a fuck, right? Nobody should.
Well, we're going to snippet that one. I like that. YouTube Shorts. Yeah, I think we're coming to the end. I think that would be a good one. I think maybe next one we should do almost kind of like a rehash of what that earlier episode was. I thought that was a good episode too. This was a solid session. And then again, just want to remind people, like and subscribe.
Please.
Please.
But I mean, like, even if you just throw a comment on the YouTube or, like, just mention it to me in the gym or send me an email. If you've got something that you want to hear about or you just have a comment on, like, something you liked or something you'd like to see differently or whatever, right? We'll take into account at the very least. I mean, we're doing this shit for free. Don't expect us to tailor it to you, right? But, it's nice to have some feedback.
Yeah, and it's like there's not necessarily... the expectation isn't that... I mean, this is always going to be serving... the gym community first, and that's kind of the goal. But these are public videos that are out there, so don't be afraid to share them with like friends and things like that you feel like need it. And to that front too, unfortunately, everything on the internet is run by algorithms, and so even just liking the video is like a crazy boost to the algorithm.
Thanks for listening if you've made it this far.
Yeah.
And until next time on the Badger Den StrengthCast.
Bye-bye.